right, super excited to introduce you to Busy Beaver and kind of how we built a tool that we hope will help community engagement with Python. My name is Luedtke. I've been in the community for about a year now. I was in the mentorship program in spring 2018, and this was my mentor actually, so we've kept in touch, still working on stuff.
So I'm Sivji. I was his mentor, and I'm also one of the Chippy organizers.
All right, so while we are presenting this tool today, there's also a team of helpful people that we couldn't have done this without, so I want to acknowledge them as well. So as you heard early tonight, this is Chippy, obviously, and we've been around for 15 years. That comes out to more than 150 monthly meetings over that time, and we've had more than 4,000 members in that time as well. So it makes us one of the most active communities in the nation. And we use Slack a lot. So any guesses at how many members? Nope, there's 1,000 members. You know this already. How many messages have been posted in the time that we've had a Slack? Any guess? Many, more than many. A million? 77,000. Close. But there's between 150 and 200 people active every week. So that's people going on the app, going on the website, and contributing to the community. So that is awesome. We also use GitHub a ton, right? We're a Python community, so everyone's pushing code to GitHub, but there's not really any way to know who's working on what, right? I could find like Ollie's account, which I have done, and I recommend you do as well. And I could find out what he's working on, but I can't just get a sense of what are people working on across the community. Like all these stats are unknown. I don't know what commits are going on or pull requests or all the helpful packages that you all are finding. So Ollie and I assessed this problem. We went to a cafe, put our heads together, and we came up with this product called Busy Beaver. Shout out to Jamile for designing this sweet logo. You can see it has aspects of the GitHub Octocat as well as the Busy Beaver, or not the Busy Beaver, the Chippy chipmunk. So the beaver, right, it works. Yeah, you can clap. Please clap.
Please clap.
So here's what it looks like. It's basically a channel that you can subscribe to or join. And it's just going to post all of the activities that you've been doing on GitHub, such as commits, different kind of repo interactions, the repos that you start, et cetera. And that could change as well. So we're building it. This is what it looks like. We run it at about 1 p.m. every day. And here's how you connect to it. So hopefully this GIF will run. There it goes. You send a message to Busy Beaver. It won't know what you mean by hi, but if you say connect, you'll be speaking its language. It'll send you a URL to go activate your account through GitHub. And that looks like this. You just have to authorize Busy Beaver to access your public data. Make sure you're letting Ollie access your social security number, date of birth, all that good stuff. And you'll be good to go. So that's kind of the glossy, high-level look. For a look at our architecture, this is a diagram that I threw together to kind of show you what's going on. Basically, it's a set of endpoints. We have a Slack app that has the ability to post messages and to detect direct messages to the bot. And we have a GitHub app that's just verifying users' identities. So we didn't want people to just self-report what their GitHub accounts were. We wanted to verify that if someone has a Slack handle, they have to go verify their GitHub handle. And we'll have a SQLite database that's going to put all that stuff together. We have a cron job that runs at 1 p.m. That's just triggering our app to go to the GitHub public data API, gather all the user activity in the last 24 hours, then format a post, which goes back to the app and then into the Chippy workspace. So we're going to transition mics, and Ollie's going to take you into the more technical aspects.
All right, so we're using Traffic as a reverse proxy and load balancer. Traffic is like Nginx, but it's built for more containerized workflows. And this is why I love Traffic. This is a snippet from the Docker Compose we use to roll out our deployment in production. And our configuration settings for our reverse proxy, they're exactly where we expect it. They're in our configuration for our Docker Compose. No more digging through Nginx, trying to figure out the correct format for configuration options. Everything exactly where you want it to be. And it's sort of a declarative syntax. And I feel like these kinds of declarative syntax are a bit of the future, but we have them now. So one of the things that I tried to implement in this web app was creating a continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. So we did write a bunch of tests. They afford us a lot of benefits, like if we change code, we know it didn't break existing functionality. Since we have those tests, we can put them into a continuous integration workflow. So every time you create a pull request, what happens is we create a build on Travis CI. It's all open source, so it's a free service to use. And when we create this build, it runs our tests. If our tests pass, that's great. This might be something we're able to merge into master. If our tests don't pass, we can go into Travis to find out exactly what failed. And once we merge into master, we kick off our continuous delivery pipeline. When we merge into master, GitHub informs Travis to kick off yet another build. We make a build, run our tests. If things are good, we build a Docker image. That Docker image gets uploaded to Docker Hub. Then I have this application called Watchtower running on my deployment server. And when Watchtower sees that the latest image has been updated, it downloads that image and it kicks off another deployment. So we have our continuous delivery pipeline already built. So a lot of the architecture and a lot of the DevOps work I took for this project, they've been inspired by the 12-factor application methodology. And this is just a really good way of building as-a-service web applications. I really recommend checking it out. So let's dive into the code. But before we dive into the code, let's discuss our application stack. So we're using SQLite as a relational data backend. So it's just a simple file-based backend. It works. It's really easy to use. It's a good way to get started. We might move to Postgres later on. We're using Responder as our web framework. And Responder is a full-featured web framework built on top of Starlet. And it has an API that's very similar to Falcon. I really like Falcon, so this is one of the things I was really looking forward for in a framework. The reason I chose Responder specifically is we're able to launch background jobs with a simple @api.background.taskDecorator. So it's just really easy to get something going without having to create my own task queue with my own workers. We're using SQL Alchemy as our ORM, or Object Relational Mapper. So we're getting objects out of our database. So each database row is now being read in as a Python object. And our Python objects can be fed back into our database as rows. And like everybody else who's using requests in Python, we're not going to mess with anything besides requests. It's just a great wrapper. Kenneth Wright did a great job with his API. And of course, we're testing. Who doesn't test? So the two tools I really recommend, of course, PyTest, that's sort of a default. But the tools I used on top of PyTest are vcr.py. And so what this does is records your request and your responses. And then after recording it, when you're running your test, it replays those cassettes. Does anybody remember those? It replays those cassettes in our test, so we're not actually hitting an external API. And I'm also using a PyTest plugin called FreezeGun. And what this does is it monkey patches our date time, so we can create deterministic dates. For tests, we want determinism, and so this is just a really good way to bring that into the project. So a few weeks ago, I picked up this book called Clean Code, but it's by Robert Martin. He's affectionately known as Uncle Bob in the programming community. And one of the reasons I wanted to start this project is it's a way to practice the skills I learned while reading this book. So some of the major themes of this book that I wanted to practice are, I wanted to make my code read like a newspaper article. When we open up a module, we want to see all of the high-level information at the top. And as we go lower into the module, we'll see our implementation details. So we'll get more information, like the way the news stories are written out. Another related thing I wanted to practice was I wanted to not write comments. I wanted my code to be readable. Comments are sort of a way of saying I could not express myself in code. So this is a little bit of a crutch. I was trying to avoid that crutch and be as quote-unquote clean as possible. Another thing that I wanted to practice was defining my boundaries. When we're importing third-party applications or third-party APIs, third-party packages, they're not meant for our particular use case. They're really meant for broad applicability. And what we want to do is we want to create an adapter and an interface that we can interact with that does exactly what we want. In design pattern speak, this might be known as an adapter, a wrapper, or a facade. Another thing I wanted to practice was using object-oriented principles like polymorphism to replace language constructs like if-else. switch case. I'm not really going to go into too much details, but I did link to a pull request I made that shows exactly what my workflow was for this kind of methodology. It's also got some links to blog posts and to some YouTube videos to help you understand what's going on. And the last thing I wanted to practice was the art of practicing. Yes, I know we're talking about practice. It's not a game. But the art of actually practicing is going to make you better when you actually want to deliver in a real-world situation. I don't know if anybody remembers that meme. I was going to have another meme that's like, sir, this is an old meme, but it checks out. But it's all good. So let's dive into the code. So we have this application structure. So I have my Busy Beaver folder. We'll get to that in a bit. I'm using Datadog as my logger, just logging things there. I'm deploying with Docker, so my configuration's right there. We have logs. I'm doing migrations with Alembic, since I'm using SQL Alchemy. It's just a really good tool for that workflow. I have some scripts, both for development and for production. They're right there. Of course, my tests with my cassettes. And these cassettes are just YAML files, so you can check them in, and you're actually able to understand what's going on. You're not reading JSON. And in my root folder, I just have some configuration settings for things like Flake8, gitignore, PDB++, Travis, and my Docker Compose YAMLs as well. So going back to writing adapters, one of the things I noticed I was doing was, this is not the right one, sorry. I noticed when I was dealing with JSON APIs, I was doing a lot of the same action. Like I was going to the API, I was hitting an endpoint with whatever method I wanted, I was looking at the JSON dictionary, I was making sure it didn't raise an exception. All of these workflows, they can be abstracted into just a function. So I just used a wrapper function here to do that. So you can see here, I'm just creating a session, best way to do it, setting some headers for my user agent, which is very important. And then here is my two HTTP methods I've implemented. And then you can see they just call this one right here, which has more general logic about actually looking at the headers and then doing some exception checking here. And if it's able to decode some JSON, it puts it in. If not, it returns a different kind of object. And so I feed this request client into another adapter, and this is going to be my GitHub adapter. And so another common thing I'm doing a lot is when I'm hitting the GitHub API, I have ability to get things like all the user stars, all the repos. But these things don't come back as just one object. They come back with a paginated JSON response. So I have to go through the pages to make sure I do all of those, to make sure I cycle through all the pages to get what I need. And all of those things, they seem very similar. So this is a really good place for adding another kind of abstraction. So you can see here, for getting all my stars and getting all my repos, I'm calling a private function called getAllItems. And here is where I'm putting in a lot of that logic. And that's really helping me abstract these things so I can make this code very reusable. And when I'm actually calling this one class from my code, it's very readable because I can say just GitHubAdapter.allUserStars instead of having to write the code to go through all that pagination. And using this kind of pattern is also really great because it makes our code very testable. We can just create an adapter like this and just really test it to make sure we're dealing with all the use cases and all the conditions that we do experience. So let's go back here.
Switch.
We're pair programming right now.
Yes. All right, so with all the coding done, we are ready for release. And we did a couple things to make sure that it went kind of smoothly, kind of like this. So we published our app into like a private channel that we just made our own Slack workspace for. And then we published it into the Chippy channel. We got a lot of feedback, but mostly it went pretty smoothly. We didn't go too high, didn't shoot for the moon, but we got the minimum viable product done. People were feeling like it made them feel competitive in a good way. They see other people's GitHub activity, and they're like, oh, why didn't my stuff show up yet? I should be on there. I should have more stuff. Things like that. Ollie's the bot's #1 fan, we learned. But people were also kind of concerned with privacy. The workflow is like, right. And I know I joked about this earlier, but we did take privacy into account. We are only accessing public data, and for the time being, that's all that we plan to do, right? And so on the Slack dashboard end, these are the things that the bot is configured to access. So it can read direct messages to the BusyBeaver bot, and it can tell who's in the channel. So that's about it.
So what's the future of BusyBeaver? We are an open source project, and we are released under the MIT license. I've been creating a lot of issues on our GitHub. Also, there's a Kanban board there, so if you're interested in helping out, find an issue you like, or if you have another idea, just let us know. We're definitely willing to add more features to this bot. It really started off as something that allows you to share your GitHub status, but I feel like it's going to sort of pivot and become the chippy community engagement bot. That's sort of the thing I'm envisioning at the end when we IPO. So how do you start contributing? Take a look at the README. I created a meta discussion channel. Join BusyBeaver-meta on Jippy Slack. And we have all our code on GitHub. And check it out. That's it for us. Thank you so much for your time. We'll take your questions.
I started recording over some question, literally, so pardon my ignorance. I'm looking at the code that you posted, and you stated that you would rather use polymorphism versus conditional if-then statements at 3 pages back.
Yeah.
Is that to consolidate the number of lines of code that you would type, or try to keep the code compact, or?
So the question was about why you would prefer to use polymorphism versus like if-else. So when you're using polymorphism, it's saying that you're making your children objects have a distinct functionality from each other, but you can use the parent objects interface to call all of the children objects. So if you call the execute on the parent object, you can have that flow through to the child objects instead of saying, is this an instance of this? If it is an instance of this, do this particular action. So I actually think I use more lines of code, but it follows this thing that Uncle Bob calls a single responsibility principle. And what that's trying to say is, when you make a change in your code, you only want it to be changed in one spot. And so, yeah, we actually did hack things together really, really quickly. But in order to be a project that people can contribute to, you want to have a code base that's modular and that's extendable and that's tested. So that's something that I care deeply about, and that's something that I wanted for this project.
Second question, I'm not trying to argue for. You made a comment, basically Bob stated that commenting is sort of unnecessary. I sort of took offense to that because in my code I comment like every other block. My question is this, is that I understand where he's coming from, obviously intellectually, but what happens when the code is reviewed by another programmer or
So that's a great question. So the question was comments. I was attacking this gentleman in the front row for saying comments are a crush. And so when you see a comment in your code, that's a perfect opportunity to factor that particular block into its own function. And then you can call that function, have something that's readable. And so that's just another way around it. I really recommend looking at this book, Clean Code. It's refined how I do things. I also recommend another book called Code Complete. And that actually taught me how to be an okay developer. I'm not that good, I'm okay. There's so many people better out there than me. Anybody else? T?
Did you find any of Uncle Bob's discussions on Pythonic?
So the question was about, did I find any of Uncle Bob's discussions on Pythonic?
Like, I'm saying, like, some parts of it.
Yeah, so
might not
he's very,
Java.
being everybody's uncle, he has a lot of weird opinions. And so a lot of his opinions come from the Java world, and they're not really applicable to Python. So yeah, I do agree, like, comments aren't that bad, but like, and he also does things like, you should keep your function very, very small. My opinion is you should keep your function small enough to be testable. So it's all really about how you want to code, but it's sort of a paradigm you can follow if you want to consider what best practices are. But the only way to find what best practices are is to actually do the work yourself. Patrick?
So if I'm a beginner or novice developer, would I be welcome to make pull requests this project?
Yeah, so the question was, being a beginner and novice developer, are you welcome on this project? Yes. We are always looking for people to help out. We only have 5 people right now. It's not going to be very sustainable with the grandeur I have for this project. So yeah, come on, help out. Like, if you have ideas on how to make this project better, if you want to implement something, I can definitely help you get started. This is sort of my goal for 2019 is to make this something that I can do a proof of concept in Chippy, but maybe deploy it out to other Slack channels for different user groups around America and the world.
I'd also like to plug, Ollie has a habit of making it big. He has our first YouTube video over 10,000 views. So it's our most popular one.
I would be blushing, but I can't blush.
You designed to be composable. When's the GitLab support or Bitbucket support coming?
So the question was about GitLab and Bitbucket support. Unfortunately, that is probably not going to be on the roadmap for this project. We're trying to pick our battles, and I think one version control system. Unless you're interested in maybe making an SVN, we can migrate it to SVN, and I'd be down with that.
How do you want to scale up, for example, for other Slack channel, and what do you think your challenges will be for scaling up?
So the question was about how do we plan on scaling for other Slack channels. So right now we're in the learning phase. Like, we just announced it today. I hope everybody's on Slack joining the Busy Beaver channel, messaging our bot and trying to get involved. And so we're going to see exactly what we learn and just go from there. I hope to give this as a lightning talk at PyCon this year with some lessons learned. So that's sort of like my goal, and then we'll just go from there. I'll be sprinting at PyCon all 4 days. Come on, sprint with me, we'll sprint on this program. Yes?
It's similar to Patrick's. Now it's maybe a suggestion for the issues. Maybe you can tag for beginners, like a beginner tag.
Yeah,
Issues.
so that's a great point. So I will start tagging the issues as good first issue for people that are new to open source or new to programming. I'd love to help you get involved. One more question.
In the back.
Right there? Yeah.
Would you have any suggestions or advice for someone to try to start implementing polymorphism?
So the question was about, do I have advice on how to implement polymorphism in a program? I wanted to go deeper into this for this talk, but I didn't think I had enough time for the subject matter. I will start putting together like a blog post or like a lightning talk coming up that I think can explain this. I have the examples all there. I just didn't think I could do it justice in the time allotted. But yeah, that's a great point.
All right.
Thank you so much, everybody.